Leila.
Yay.
Hey, hello.
Hello.
Hey,
Hi.
long time no see.
Oh, feels like forever.
Mm. The reason I raised my hand is because you were talking to Aunt Amy about something that is the reason I sent you all the Aphantasia and
Yeah,
Aurelia interviews. So for everybody's interest, there are a lot of people in this world who have no ability to visualize at all in their head. So all they see is what's in front of them. They cannot see they cannot lay a red apple. If you say red apple, they don't see a picture. And then there are people called anoreliacs who don't hear themselves talking to themselves in their head. So there was this lovely interview I came across my feed of a woman at the age of 40. She's the mother of two children. And she found out that her husband and her two children were seeing pictures in their heads. And for her whole life, she didn't know that people did that. And she was so upset. She was like, I'm going to kill myself now because I've missed out on all of life. You guys are seeing Disney movies in your heads, and I've been deprived. And her reaction was so
wow.
bizarre. There was one video of her when she just found out. And then what's happened over time is she's now talking to a lot of people. She started this Aphantasia help club where people call her and talk to her on YouTube who are also either aphantasics or they're not, and they're just interested. So anyway, to make a long story short, the way you were telling Amy, notice what the sense of I is based on. Because we
Yeah,
assume, like in Liberation Unleashed, or even in all the psychologic research, they've assumed that the self is an internal image of a body.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah,
And that's why they think that you become self-aware when you see yourself in a mirror. And without a mirror, without that mirror reflection that happens at 18 months, kids aren't self-aware. And then
yeah,
they also have this whole idea that selfness also is based on this narrative, the narrative of me that keeps
yeah,
happening in the head that creates this continuous story. Well, this woman has neither of those, but she has a very solid self. So
Yes.
I've been listening to her,
interesting.
talking to a
So
lot of
interesting.
people,
Yeah.
wondering how the hell she's still thinking, and she calls it a feeling of a self.
Yeah,
She doesn't like, she's like, but she says the coolest thing. She says to, like, she was talking to some guy and she was saying, well, why do you have pictures in your heads all the time? And he says, well, pretty much all the time. Occasionally I get a break when I meditate. And he said, aren't you exhausted? Isn't it exhausting to like be bombarded with pictures when there's something right in front of you? And he says, well, I only come up with daydreaming pictures when I'm bored. And she said, but how could you be bored? It, like in her expression, how can you be bored? Because there's something always happening there, right? So
Yeah.
yeah,
she's not enlightened or awake by any means. I mean, it's so interesting. And then she said, he says, yes, but things in my head are much brighter and more, sounds are more acute and colors are brighter when I see them in my head than in front of me. And she says, wow, that's really interesting. She said, maybe I just don't have, maybe I see things brighter than you do. Yes, my
Yeah.
base state, right? Maybe the
yeah,
world is just more interesting to me than it is to
Yeah.
because I don't get bored by looking at something the way you might get bored.
yeah.
This is so interesting.
So
Yeah,
interesting.
super
So
fascinating.
So
in
I have no idea how the self is created then.
No,
well,
I
her
mean,
feeling, so this is, I think, what it is, and this is where I want your opinion.
yeah,
It's taking internal sensations. So
Yeah.
yeah,
she's propriocepting, and then she's interpreting that as a me because she's attaching the story to it, making it an
Yeah.
emotion, and then making it a me. So
Yeah.
it's the
yeah,
feeling of just the baby like walking down, learn how the baby learns to walk. Is it propriocepts
Mm.
that this body will fall if the foot goes right or left, right? And
yeah,
she's developing the belief system that that's a me without any picture or dialogue associated with it.
yeah,
So she always calls me a feeling.
yeah. I get
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. I get that too. Yeah.
I had a session with somebody yesterday, and they were saying that, you know, they can meditate and they can do things where they become very spacious and out there and expansive, but then it all contracts back into this little box. And I'm like, okay, so how do we feel this sense of a box? Like, how do we know it's there? And some of it is in the visual field, because I asked them, if if you're looking sort of tunnelly forward, we have this kind of idea, like if we're focused out, our visual field seems kind of smaller and more focused. But if you go to the periphery on the sides and also the top and bottom, all of a sudden that starts to expand our feeling of boxiness, or that locality that we have. So then I said, the physical sensations. Do you notice the physical sensations that are contributing to this feeling of location? And they said, yeah, there's more, like, it's almost like blood flow to the face and to the chest, and that's what gives this sense of pronounced being contracted. And I said, well, when somebody first introduced you to inquiry and asked you to recognize the hallmarks of the self, the things that felt like a self, why did you pick those as the ones that you deem to be the self? And they're like,
Yeah, why?
really good question. Like, no idea. Like, we assume that those are the signifiers of a self, but we don't actually know. We have no proof. It's like, it's something that is there so prevalent, and it seems to be engaged the more we like focus on things that give us that feeling of like directed intentional focusing. We feel this sort of tension contracting in areas. And I think it's like this combination of that, and like you said, the proprioception and just that feeling of bodily movement, that seems to give us that false sensation of volition and location, that has just been so uninvestigated our entire life, that's just the assumption that that's me.
That's me. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
And
so
also,
fascinating.
it's not stable. It changes all the time. The sense
Yeah.
of
Completely.
me is, that's why the upper fetters are so fascinating, because you've seen through the idea and belief of me, and yet
Yeah.
there's identification with these such subtle cues, like you're asking Amy, okay, the world is flat. Well, who's noticing the world is flat? Or where is that person or that idea or that entity that notices the world is flat? And if you
Yeah.
have no visual and you have no auditory, you can still position yourself as a point of view. And how to do that, it's just fascinating. Anyway, so I'm gonna I want to interview this woman, but I want
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I want to get her with you guys too, in a way. I want to get all the right
Okay.
questions assembled so we can
Yeah.
get underneath it, because she's like an
Uh,
experimental case where you're eliminating the two prominent senses,
Yeah.
yeah.
right?
I,
And
I'm
it's
I'm
still there.
100% up for that
Yeah. Yeah. Me
conversation.
too. Me
Do a
too.
group interview with her. Okay, cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100% on
Yeah.
board with that.
That
I
that
think
would
that
be
would,
so interesting. Yeah, I would love that.
thank you. Thank you for bringing that up, because that would be,
Anyway, sorry,
yeah,
that's my
Super
latest,
fascinating.
that's
Yeah.
my latest geeking thing I've been doing.
that's amazing. That's amazing. And
Super fascinating.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I have to say, it was the funniest thing when you came on and you were stroking the cat's tail. I didn't see it as a cat's tail at first. It looked like you were one of those bad AI videos where you just had too many fingers coming and disappearing back into a hand. And it was like so confusing for a minute. I'm like, what am I seeing? It's so strange. I'm like, oh, I think there's a cat attached to that.
Right, but you had to have the thought about a cat because you knew I had one, right?
Completely, yeah,
Anyway,
because it was just this much that looked like this extra finger that just kind of kept appearing and then going back into a hand. It was like,
But
that's not,
that is actually a really good example of what we talked about previously.
yeah,
That the moment you start to see through thought and you do not accept thought to be truth anymore, you start to see through all the things that the brain just puts in as truth.
yeah,
That must be something else. It can't be Lila's finger. He's not AI, but you
yeah,
notice it because you have slowed down and zoomed in. It was like yesterday, it was dark outside and we turned the light on. And then I saw a movement. And first I thought it was a fox, a Danish fox. Then I knew it can't be a fox, obviously.
well,
Then I thought it was a dog.
it can't be a Danish
It can't
fox.
be a Danish fox.
It could be an American fox.
Then I thought then it must be a dog. And then I was like, it doesn't fit with a dog. Oh, it must be a coyote. But those thoughts went so quick, and that little animal was morphing for every time my brain tried to see something else until it landed on coyote. Okay, it's a coyote. It's so funny when you really become aware how much the brain does not know shit. It's grasping at straws. Oh, Leela, she's AI, you know? It's completely grasping.
Completely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's so funny.
Interesting.
Yeah. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you. So good
Mm.
seeing you again.